as much as Husker fans will tell you that folks are locked into the legacy that is Nebraska football and Nebraska athletics, they lock in. As much as they tell you they don't, they lock in. Like they pay attention to it and they want to be, have that discussion. So they were asked, and they rattle off the usual names of Husker legends, and then it comes down to, well, but DB, who doesn't get the deserved hype? Mm-hmm. Like, who are the underrated, underappreciated Huskers? The ones that did legitimate work. They don't get enough. I mean, there are folks who made a play who get longevity.
Right.
But there are folks who had great careers, great moments, and we don't talk about them enough. And the first person that came to mind for me was Jerry Taggy. That he comes up once in a while.
Yeah, not enough
for what he did in this space.
Right, yeah.
Taggy's the guy that I'm old enough that Taggy was my Thanksgiving quarterback.
Yeah, and I think it's all based on, your time frame. I think Jerry Taggy, if you think from the time he got done playing into say mid 80s, he'd be, he probably was thought of as the best quarterback. I guess him and Turner Gill, ever to play. And then obviously T. Frage comes, and then obviously Eric Crouch and so forth and so on. So it just kind of depends on, your time frame that you became a Nebraska fan, or, started to really pay attention to college football. And then really looking at the games and say, oh man, that's a pretty good player. He's been, a good player for, 2, 3, 4 years, but he's not in the, I guess back when I was in college, the Daily Nebraskan, or in this case, any of the, media outlets and so forth and so on. So first name that came to mind for when I was around, immediately thought of a guy like Tony Veland. Obviously was a great player. I would say somewhat soft-spoken, but a tremendous leader. He's like E.F. Hutton. He didn't say much, but when he spoke, everybody listened because they knew it was something obviously important, and it had some obviously substance behind it. And obviously went on and had a really good professional career and does a lot of great things up in Omaha. But when you have when you're on a run like we were on, and you generally, there wasn't the numerous amount of say social media or the ability to market yourself. So Nebraska really focused on marketing. On offense, it was running back, obviously quarterback, offensive line. On defense, generally it was, the defensive ends, D line, and when you start, you have a corner after Tony, maybe like Mike Brown and them, but Mike and Ralph were part of a package deal. So you think Tony Veland came after Kareem Moss. Both of those guys are unsung heroes. They're the one that set the defense. Tremendous hitters, communicators, and great, great ability to make plays on the ball. And so you think Tony, quiet as kept. I mean, T. Frage won't say it. If Tony didn't hurt his knee, you might not hear about T. Frage playing quarterback, because that's how good he was, or at least that's what I was told how good he was coming out of Omaha. But then it takes a tremendous person and athlete to switch to the other side and then be effective and find a way. And Tony was a hitter.
Isn't that most of the elite Huskers were two-sided players? Both-sided players in high school, and even when they got on campus, they still weren't sure which side of the ball they were going to end up on.
Well, I mean, back then, you played both ways because you were playing football. I mean, you didn't have the special, you talk to kids now in like 8th grade. I want to be a quarterback. I want to be this. And next thing you know, you even see it in some of the guys that we recruited, they're exclusively at, maybe wide receiver or DB. And that's why I talk about, Jalen Lloyd in Omaha, where he has shown you the ability to play defensive back and receiver. So when he comes to campus, he's a football player. So the landscape is different. But I think majority of your great players started at a position and go to next. Now, granted, in Ndamukong Suh, he could never be a DB, even though he had great feet. But when you think of like Prince, he came in as a running back. Like Baron Miles.
Yeah, we didn't even get his last name right.
I'm not even going to try.
Amukamara is what it was.
Yeah.
No. He actually came on this station and said that the actual pronunciation is Amukamara.
Whoa.
Just call him Ami.
Lifelong Nebraska blew my mind, DP.
Yeah, he literally he came on. He was on with Rashawn, and he said, "Yeah, I just want to correct the this thing that's happened all this time.
Right.
Amukamara is the actual pronunciation.
Yeah.
And
So
I went, okay, well, thanks.
During that time when they had really good defense at Nebraska with the DBs, I think you had the Eric Higgs and all that, and all those guys on the Bose defense, all of them were offensive players, and he made them, turned them over to corner and safeties and so forth and so on. So, like you think of Barron Miles, even Kenny Wilhite that was on before, he was a quarterback. Kenny was a quarterback. So was Barron. If you're a good football player, you're a good football player. And then you got your usual suspects like, you had glue guys like Phil Ellis and Doug Coleman that were phenomenal players. Doug's coaching now, and then Phil's, he's I think he's like in agriculture out there in Grand Island. But both of those guys were really good on our 95 team. And so those are guys you never think about. But if you put them out there with, sometimes where you see guys that are, stat leaders in Nebraska history where, sometimes it could get overblown when you're playing with, I wouldn't say, when you're playing with 10, 11 other guys that are dudes that are going to play on the next level versus if you're only playing with like a couple other guys and, other guys, you got 8 guys that can't walk and chew gum, your stats are going to get a little bit overblown. So that's why you got to look at who you play with because that does matter.
Let's go through your last championship team. And on that roster of guys who all went to the league, there were guys who those guys didn't want to match up with at practice. The guys who look, the Peter brothers were all in place, but there were guys that they didn't want to have to really mess with, and they got better because of it. Who were some of those guys?
Well, I mean, defensively, we never backed down from anybody, but I mean, you think like just off of the the Aaron Taylor's over there, Josh Heskew's over there, John Zaska's over there. You even go to 95, who was like the second coming of the pipeline where they didn't have a legal procedure penalty all year. I mean, you talk about excellence and you're talking about breathing excellence into your team. You just see the pipeline come through, beat Miami, and then here you guys go kind of with just Aaron Graham and 4 new knuckleheads because the 4 previous guys go to the league and they're the best offensive line in Nebraska history. And here comes some dudes that, they got spot duty. I mean, don't get me wrong, but not the championship type of, they didn't play in the national championship.
What was AD say? There were 30 or 30 guys.
Right,
you had to be up by 30, down by 30, or then, 30 seconds left.
And then here they come, and then they take it to another level. And you got we had the Makovica brothers over there, and then you think Corey Schlesinger. I mean, it was the competition and development went hand in hand, and that's how you end up being sustainable championship type of team. I mean, granted, when you go play Power 5 football, I know with Nebraska it seems like they just had like 8 commitments in the last like 10 hours, but everybody's good. What separates everybody is like, one, can you leave all that behind? And that's the hardest thing I think for guys in this generation, leaving that behind when you get to Nebraska. Leaving it behind, but you don't forget it because you don't want to forget, the hard work and what got you here. But you got to leave it behind because what you did at high school at, say Jay Foreman at Eden Prairie High School, that don't mean tiddly poo when you come down there because there might be a kid from, I always talk about Brian Shaw, man. I look Brian, he always lights me up after I say this. I remember looking at Brian, like looking at this dopey looking white dude, right? 6'3", 210, and then we get out there and we had to test out. I'm like, damn. He could jump.
Didn't see it coming.
Then I'm like, damn, he can run a little bit. Then I'm like, damn, he's actually quicker in the agility than me. And then I'm like, oh, he makes no mistakes. He's tough as nails. He's accountable. And he has that it factor to him. Like where if you see Brian, he'll, he's in, he came from a family and athlete. I always mess with him like, everybody, you're the worst athlete out, but he won't say that. Whereas like, it comes down to he's an all shucks type of dude, but he'll poke your eyes out.
So that's usually the norm, though. Those people sneak up and they're there. I want to ask you what that actually the national folks brought to mind and said that we should be ashamed of ourselves as Husker fans by not putting him on a pedestal more often. It comes up every now and then that he's elite, but Rich Glover, I'm not sure that he isn't the best defensive lineman to ever play here.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, when he was coming, I mean, he didn't have the media outlets, and Nebraska was not Alabama. Nebraska, you got to think Devaney, and this is all I learned this as I gotten older. Whereas he came here and kind of resurrected this program from the depths of hell, and so you get Rich Glover, who was pretty much unstoppable. Then you had Larry Jacobson with him, and those two were like, the ultimate warriors.
20 and 17 tackles a game between two.
Just those two. There was nothing going on.
Like no work.
Yeah, it was like, let's just get through this game, and just because these guys are going to wreak havoc. And Rich Glover was that dude. But I think in the walls of Nebraska, he's held up on a pedestal. Like he's like the OG when he comes, and he doesn't come. I think he comes like once a year. But when he does, guys gravitate to him because he's the guy that I remember when I was playing. I heard about him, but then when I finally got to meet him, it was like, oh, that's the dude that actually paved the way for, Jay Foreman and everybody that, before me and after me, because he was the one that was in my opinion, first starting getting Nebraska on prominence, on defense, on the defensive side, but then also being an African American as well, and from being out of state. So all those three things that he had going on,
and the most padded player in the history of
Nebraska. They all were.
Like he wore pads on his ankles. Like it's phenomenal to watch him from fingertips to neck. He's covered.
Yeah.